So people sometimes ask me about what this term is that I often reference when I talk about therapy and I talk about parts work. Now, what is parts work? So there's many different theories that use the concept of parts work. And parts work basically just refers to the fact that in a human being, we are a compilation of many different parts of ourselves. So as like a whole version of self, I might be, right, the age, my personality, who I am to the world, who I am to myself. So that's like the basic part of self that comes forward to the world. But inside of that, right, so that's kind of like a big ocean, but then there might be like many streams of water that come from different sides, and it's all different parts of self that make up who we are. So for example, there might be a part of self that's very nurturing, right? So just a very giving, nurturing part of self that comes out at home or in relationships or, in really close friendships. And that part of self comes out forward. But when you're at work, right, there might be like a worker self, a more professional, a bit more withdrawn, attentive to detail part of self. So there's different parts of self that engage in different kinds of ways. Now, what happens is that when we go throughout life, and we have interactions, we kind of develop these parts of ourselves based on our experiences. So if I had a really nurturing caregiver, I might have a part of myself that's very nurturing to myself, okay? And then I know how to nurture others. Sometimes people don't have nurturing figures, but they really want to become a nurturing figure and they want to be nurtured, and then their life goal is, how do I learn to be that nurturing person? How can I be different than what I was given? So that's like the parts of self. We sometimes have a part of ourselves that's very critical. When we talk about the inner critic, a popular picture that people choose for inner critics is like this woman who's looking at a whole laundry list of things you have to do, and you're never good enough, right? Like brush your hair, comb your teeth, wash your hands, right? Stand up straight. So this could be an inner critic that most of us have a part of ourselves that's very critical. The question is just, how big is your critic? Does your critic never shut up? Or does your critic come from time to time, but you know how to tame it and work with it and integrate it into yourself? And there's also protective parts, right? Do I have a protective part that comes out when somebody tries attacking me, insulting me, or criticizing me? Do I know how to have like a more strong part of myself to come forward and set a boundary and say like, no? And also, do I have that protective part regarding people who I love, people in my life, where I know how to be super protective? Even if I'm a gentle, compassionate person, do I have that protective part? So some of the protective images are kind of like somebody at war, kind of, don't you dare, right? I'm hiding from behind and I'm going to shoot if you're not gentle, figuratively speaking, right? We don't shoot people. And then there's kind of like this powerful, like, I got this, like, I'm strong, I'm powerful. If something comes up, like, I'm going to step forward. Now, there's also sometimes younger inner child parts that may have gone through a lot. So it could be like a child, an adult who went through situations where it felt like the whole world was on his shoulders. If his caregivers or parents or even something in the family or community was going on and it felt like he had to carry or she had to carry it all alone. This can be feeling like a part of self that's very overwhelmed and doesn't have anybody there. Or someone who maybe went through like, was left alone, right? The car is pulling out of the driveway and the child is there. Now, it can be that he wasn't really alone and there were people around him or her, but this feeling of aloneness. So what we want to look at is, as you're going through your daily life, is there a part of self that sometimes comes out? Like, are you able to be your nurturing self in nurturing situations? Are you able to be a more, professional self in professional situations? Are you able to be protective in the right time? And sometimes, and then there's also like a carefree part, right? Like a playful, like, I'm on top of the world, hey, joyous part. Because when you've been through a trauma, or when we've had some kind of situation that kind of left a dent on our sense of identity and self, what you'll notice is that in certain situations, you're responding or interacting in a way that isn't as aligned with what you naturally would, or as people say, should. So kind of like if somebody brushes you off and you have a very strong reaction, or the feeling stays with you for a very, very long time, right? And it kicks up this negative belief of yourself. I'm not important. Nobody cares about me. I'm not lovable, right? and it's disproportionate to the interaction, it might be a part of yourself that is coming forward that was hurt a long time ago or picked up this belief that might need some healing work, so that we could file that away as a past experience or a belief that served a purpose at some point in time. But we want to look at what beliefs do we want to help you strengthen that will help you function better in the here and now and in current relationships and with current interactions. Right? We don't just shut it down. We're not just doing cognitive therapy of like, that's a bad thought, chuck it away, right? We first want to say like, wow, that thought looks like it needs some healing, or it's coming forward because there's a really important message, right? If a critical part or an angry part of self comes forward, we don't shut it down. We want to listen to the message that it has to say. We want to be able to respond and support it so that it could slowly become more gentle and transform into a part that could be helpful and conducive to you as a person who's functioning in this world. So that's my little snippet on parts work. If you have any question about identifying the parts of self, a part of self that you feel like has been very strong and you really want to strengthen, or be more with another part of yourself when you interact in your love relationships, in relationships with your children, with yourself, or as a professional, feel free to shoot me any questions. I'd be happy to answer.